Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Here he's the immaculate Jasper Lane.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And today we're discussing the one, the only Eddard Stark. Because we finished with House of the Dragon season one for now. We might as well go back into the rest of the Game of Thrones universe by, I guess, jumping forward 150 years or so to the events of A Song of Ice and Fire, and do a show versus book comparison.
And
Well,
I
Eddard,
go ahead.
oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Eddard in the show and the book are is pretty much the same. So, video over. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to both channels. And wait, there's more.
Yeah, I mean, you are partly right. I don't know how much we can really go on because Sean Bean as Eddard Stark, the first four seasons of Game of Thrones is some of the most immaculate in regards to adaptation that there is. And really, aside from some visual aspects, Sean Bean is a perfect casting and portrayal of Eddard, and he hits all the major beats.
Well, Sean Bean's perfect casting for every role, and is the perfect actor.
I mean, he's pretty good. Pretty darn good. I'll give you that.
Come on, in the modern age, he's like at least in the top 10 best in the world.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far. Because obviously he's known for Boromir and Eddard, but as far as like his other roles, they're just not all that groundbreaking.
I know, but well, there's some that he just brings a lot of character and energy and charisma to,
Oh yeah,
because he is a very charismatic guy. When you look at the Frankenstein Chronicles, for example, he plays pretty much Frankenstein's monster, spoilers, and he does such a great job with the role. And you also have the his portrayal of Odysseus, which is just perfect and mesmerizing. It like I don't and then there's of course Sharp, where with Sharp's rifles from the 90s, which he of course does a great job. The thing about Bean, I'm just saying, is he's a almost unparalleled actor. So his portrayal of Ned, he often, I'm going to be honest, he steals the scene. Every scene that he's in, he steals it.
I
And
I don't think he steals every single scene he's in, but he's really good in all of them. There is one character that I think might surpass him, but that's for the next video.
mm,
But in regards to Sean Bean as
yeah,
Eddard, literally the only critique that I would have is like, it would have been nice if he darkened his hair a bit, but other than that, he's a perfect role for the
fair,
character. He fills it out very nicely. He's got the same
yeah,
gravitas to him, and he's older than the book counterpart, but they everyone's kind of aged up in the books, thank God.
yeah. And Catelyn's about 50 years older than in the book. I'm joking. I'm joking. But Sean Bean, I'm going to be honest. Before I ever saw Game of Thrones, I was already a fanboy of his. From Sharp's Rifles to Frankenstein Chronicles to no wait, well, I saw that before, even though it was made a little after Game of Thrones. So, well, at least the first season. To Odysseus to from the Troy movie to, of course, Lord of the Rings, and I still maintain Sean Bean should have been cast as Aragorn. I'm gonna die on that hill. And Viggo Mortensen should have been cast as Boromir. He would have been perfect as Boromir. But anyways, that's a different conversation. But as to the character of Ned Stark, well, what's interesting is that as a character, where in the show he's such a, and even in the first book, he's such a important character. What's really interesting is that growing up, he was kind of um, overshadowed by his siblings, especially in regards to his father's favor. And his siblings were, well, they weren't very bright to to be nice.
I mean,
So
the
it's interesting.
eldest wasn't very bright, but the younger one wasn't. Like, I don't think he's that dumb.
Okay, Benjamin. No, I forgot about Benjamin. Yeah, he was pretty good. He has a brain. Fair enough. Benjamin has a brain. It's Liana and what's his name? The eldest. Those two are just. Eh, I almost think the that the kindest thing someone could do to them was stick a sword in their gut. But on the other hand, that's a little harsh, especially considering how the brother goes down, which I do think was a little. That was a little harsh on Eris's part with the whole strangulation thing. Uh, that said, Eddard, of course, grew up in the Eyrie because, well,
The
you know,
Eerie.
he's not exactly useful, or the Erie, however you English pronounce it.
Listen, I
And
know it's difficult for you
he,
to talk with a frog in your throat, but come on.
but the frog is so delicious.
I mean, I'm not denying that,
Uh,
but it makes it difficult for you to pronounce our words right.
touché. T'as raison, mon ami. T'as raison. Mais en tout cas, uh, Ned grew up in the lands of the Arryns, and it's really interesting how, like I said, I don't know how wanted or cared for he was with his father. His father probably cared enough, but saw him probably more as a tool in a way. You know what I mean? Like he's just the second son. He's the spare. While over with John Arryn and the Erie, Eddard actually became someone, I guess, who kind of mattered. And it's really interesting how overshadowed he is. In a lot of ways, it's almost like he's overshadowed even by Benjen growing up. And I know that's an exaggeration, but it's just he doesn't seem to have mattered to an extent until Robert Baratheon basically took him up as his bro. And it's interesting how Ed Ard always played kind of the more restraining influence in a way over Robert's more bombastic personality inside to him, which they're the two are marked contrast to each other. And yet Robert is in some ways, I would argue, a smarter version of Eddard's older brother. And I know people would say Bobby B is not very smart, but I actually think Bobby B is very smart. He's just it's just a matter of he doesn't care
I
anymore.
I'll fight you a little bit on that. I don't think Robert's dumb, but I don't think he's smart either. The only thing where he might be incredibly intelligent is in regards to battle and warfare, both in his own personal combat
Well,
abilities and strategizing. Just considering how well he did at the beginning of the war.
but arguably Robert's also a better politician than Eddard. I'm just saying because he knows, like he sees through the people on his small council. He knows better than to trust them all, and he's like, for example, the way he talks about uh, uh, Tywin and Cersei and whatnot. He sees through them. He sees through Littlefinger. He sees through even Varys. I think it's just a matter that he really doesn't give a darn anymore. Whereas Eddard, I'm not saying he's dumb. He is obviously pretty smart, but he's in a way blinded by his own perceptions of things and a little gullible.
I actually want to kind of go into that a bit more. So it's fairly common, I would say, among the fandom to look at Eddard as a bit of an idiot in regards to what he did when he arrived in King's Landing. And there is some pushback, like, nah, he wasn't an idiot. It was just his honor that got in the way. He wouldn't sacrifice his morals. And, it goes back and forth in that. I want to go out on a limb and say Eddard won until the unthinkable happened. Because he had won when he discovered that Cersei and Jamie created
Yeah,
the bastards. He had one. He just needed Robert to get home, and he'd be like, "Hey, bro, them kids of yours ain't yours." Then, and that was
yeah.
it.
And
But
I imagine
it was an
that
entire
that exact
accident. Like, granted,
that would
somewhat played into by Cersei by trying to get Robert to drink. But as she said, he could have stopped drinking. He didn't have to order all the guys around him to step back. His death was his fault. So Eddard played a good game, and he, in a lot of ways, won. It was just this act of the gods in their world that screwed him over.
and there's also another thing with Eddard. He actually also had Tywin cornered because the thing is, is not. Tywin's a good manipulator and good at setting up backstabbing, but he's not a class strategist and tactician in battle.
In warfare, yeah.
And yeah, he's not a great general. Whereas Eddard and Robert are basically they remain unconquered generals. They're pretty much the best. So the field of the the field of battle he chose was the field of battle with Tywin. Like, okay, well, we're gonna fight out in the battlefield. My army versus yours. See you there. Be there or be square, Tywin. And had they met in battle with their armies, Eddard doubtlessly would have won.
So
But on the other hand,
I'm a little confused when
but
you're
I'd also
talking
argue,
about this because there was never really a point where Eddard. I don't think there is a point where Eddard really cornered Tywin because he made that
well, what I mean
announcement
is,
like in the throne room when
well,
Tywin was advancing into the Riverlands because of what Caitlyn did. Like he made the announcement, but that's when
well,
he has the authority of Hand of the King.
I mean is, what I mean is that he is trying to make a move against Tywin, just as Tywin is trying to make a move against, well, the Tullys. But this will come to blows between them. If it's in a political theater of battle, so to speak, Tywin will win. So Eddard is trying to push for an open conflict to an extent, or at least he's if he's gonna squabble with Tywin, it'll be on the battlefield, army versus army.
Yeah, but that's
Although Tywin's kind of
isn't that
that,
kind of
but
interesting though that given this situation, at least how I feel, Eddard's kind of the bad guy.
well,
Like, let me
to
explain.
an extent.
Let me explain. Obviously, the
But
Lannisters, specifically Cersei and Jamie, are messed up for the whole infidelity as well as, the
well, there's like,
incest and whatnot. But you have to think, Tywin is being somewhat, like, reasonable in the fact that it took the kidnapping of his son for him to launch an attack in the Riverlands, which, if I was a father, granted, this wasn't. My motivations would be completely different from Tywin, but that's to be like somewhat expected. I think that Tywin's actions in that instance were perfectly justified.
fair enough. No, I'm actually going to say fair enough. And in a way, I think that it's a case where neither of them are exactly in the right.
Yeah. I'm also a bit more skeptical on Eddard being the superior tactician to Tywin, just because I feel like there isn't really a military victory that we for sure can give to him. Because if I remember correctly, Eddard's like first battle was when both the Vale and the North made it south and saved Robert during the Battle of the Bells. And then with all the forces of the Stormlands, the Riverlands, the North, and the Vale, they marched south and engaged in the Battle of the Trident. It's not guaranteed that Eddard really had full command of the situation in any of the battles he really participated in because there were more senior and experienced individuals there.
Fair enough.
Particularly, I'd imagine Jon Arryn would take a lot of the reins, and Robert, just because he has a very forceful personality, and he had actually four more battles than Eddard.
Yeah. That said, there's a lot of debate about how much strategizing Eddard had to do with the war. I'm just saying.
I mean,
That said,
I do think he's good, just for the simple fact is he gave birth to Robb, and I don't think it's like that's genetics or anything. I think someone had to teach him, and Eddard would have been the prime source of that knowledge.
And the thing is, while Rob's his own topic, but Rob is a very skilled military tactician.
Specifically
And
military.
yeah, yeah. He mopped the floor with Tywin for a while. But I would argue not that it's very hard. Tywin's not a very skilled tactician militarily. But on the other hand, Tywin makes up for it with other knowledges and skills.
Yeah, he's a much
That
he's
said,
much more privy with politics rather than military.
yeah, basically, on the other hand, I have the theory that had Rob lived on, what's weird is I think Rob probably would have grown to be more like Tywin Lannister as an individual rather than Eddard.
Really?
Um, yeah, I have a theory about that because I just think that life, like some of Rob's decisions, remind me in some ways of a young Tywin, and I think that Rob in time might like if his wife had passed under similar circumstances, would he have become like Tywin? Like I just wonder how much alike they are.
Hmm.
And it's just that when I was reading, I was kind of thinking to an extent, these two characters are in some ways similar but different. They have different skills, but there's the honor of the family and there's the obsession with the Stark or Lannister side. Like they're obsessed with their own family in a way.
Well, I
And I know it's
personally
weird.
strongly disagree with that, but I do think we should save that for the Rob episode that will likely inevitably come. But keeping the focus onto
But
Eddard, I think I remember
Eddard,
one situation where it's quite a bit different from the books.
hmm?
Remember when Eddard discovered Arya having Needle in both the books and the show?
Yep.
And I might be remembering this incorrectly, but I remember in the books, Eddard wasn't like thrilled to find her with Needle. And I think I distinctly remember him threatening to snap the sword across his knee, Needle.
Ah, yeah.
I'm guessing that, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying like that's a big difference, but that's probably the first one that jumps to my mind as far as what I can recollect from the books.
It shows, I think, that um, uh, I think it shows that at his core, there's in the book, Eddard is a far more severe man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if severe would be the right word, but
Strict.
he's harsh. Yeah, he's harsh and tough. He's like ice itself. And on the other hand, he, well, throughout season one, it's really in the first book, it's really interesting seeing him contrasted with Robert and how the two often end up having shouting matches and squabbling, and ultimately, much as the two very evidently love each other, there's a Robert's lack of ruling, to put it mildly, and just leaving the realm to rot to an extent, is a good source of conflict between these two.
Yes, because Eddard is
Especially,
far more dutiful than Robert.
yeah, yeah. But on the other hand, I wonder. Um, that said, Robert has taken a lot of lumps and whatnot for, to an extent, he did his duty when he married Cersei, and that would probably poison anyone towards duty.
I mean,
I'm just saying.
I'm going to be a little sympathetic for Cersei. It must be rough being married to Robert, just as rough as it is to be married to Cersei. I think while Cersei is worse, like both are not the most pleasant people to spend the rest of your life with.
oh, but Robert Baratheon at least has drunken songs and at least some good stories. So I'm just saying there is that going for him.
Hmm. I mean, like I said, I like Robert more, but I wouldn't want to be married to him.
No, no, no. You'd want him for a bro, but not a marriage partner.
Hmm.
Also, because he's really rich. Okay. Actually, Robert doesn't seem to. But there, actually, being his bro seems to be hard for Eddard, who seems to remember. Like, what I find interesting is that in the book, at least, Eddard does seem to look back upon the older Robert Baratheon with a great deal of wistfulness and longing. Like, he wants his friend to return to being that man that he was, like, what, 15, 16 years ago or something.
Hmm. I mean,
Um,
can we like
and
agree that Eddard is most likely very gay for young Robert?
yeah, probably. And
I mean, to
the
be
problem
fair,
is,
it's Robert. Everyone's a little bit gay for Robert, especially young Robert. But damn, every time Eddard like thinks back to Robert in his glory days, it's just some of the wow. I don't even talk about that nicely to my friends.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Uh, it, yeah, yeah. Eddard is very fond of young, but the trouble is that Robert has kind of died a long time ago. And Ned, it's almost like a process of grieving throughout the story of Game of Thrones. And when I say that, I mean like the first book, like in the first season. It's like a grieving process for Ned, where he, like he's still he's wanting to try to find Robert Baratheon, the demon of the Trident, in there somewhere, but it's hard because that man died long ago, and I think that Ned, it's a bit of whiplash on his part as he's trying to reconcile himself to this king that he doesn't really know to an extent.
Hmm.
And because I'm just saying, like it's been what, a decade since they last saw each other, since probably the war with the Ironborn.
Yeah, give or
10 years
take.
is a long time. Yeah, about 10 years. That's a long time. That can change a man.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
and this might sound weird, but I think Ned has changed as well from those days. It's just Ned doesn't realize it.
In what way do you mean? Because when I think back at least to how they spoke about Eddard in a past tense when he was younger, he's always been a very kind of stoic, not very emotional young lad, which doesn't seem that different from his adult life.
I think that he's become more Eddard Stark. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like he's gotten more reserved, more uh, just harder in a way, and more stoic. That's what I mean. Like he's become more Eddard Stark than before. That said, what
Are you
you
there?
snickered there?
Oh, no, sorry. I think that was my chair squeaking.
Okay. Well, I also think that the most interesting part of the first book or first season is the murder mystery thing with Eddard playing Sherlock Stark and trying to sniff out the evidence and the culprit.
Hmm.
And I'm going to be honest, um, I'm not the biggest fan of this series because it's not really my cup of tea. But I'm not going to lie, I really like the murder mystery aspect. I really do like um, a murder mystery of any kind because I love Sherlock Holmes and I love old fashioned mystery novels. So for me, I kind of wish that Martin had kept. I part of me had hoped he would, because like halfway through the book I could see where he was going, but I was kind of like, can't this be a murder mystery fantasy series instead? Like just
It's
with
it's funny you
that.
say that because Eddard never solves the mystery. He discovers a completely different mystery and solves that one. We don't
Yeah,
find out about the initial John Aaron killing until like what 4, 5 books later.
Yeah, and I think that it might have been interesting to have, well, whatever. What I think isn't important because it's your material for the reality. But the thing is, what I liked was just how he went about solving a completely different mystery. And, like, now he made the mistake of trusting Baelish, which was such a mistake. He should have gutted Baelish when he had a chance. Because Baelish is just, it's so obvious he's scheming.
Yeah,
Like,
that was
nobody's.
always. I mean, this would probably serve better for his own video, but that won't be later. So I will say I did always have a bit of a disconnect with Baelish because, like, I remember George R. R. Martin saying like everyone trusts Baelish, everyone likes Baelish. When I distinctly remember, nah, no one fucking trusted Baelish. Baelish was a slime dog and everyone knew it, but he was a good slime dog. But reading back, it
Yeah,
does seem that there's like a transformation of Baelish, where initially he was more of a obvious sinister character, whereas in later books, because he still has that sinister aspect about him, because we know his goals and what he's after and whatnot. But he is played off as a far more charismatic individual.
I guess. It's just that I just tend to think that him and Varys is like they're scheming. Can't you see it? It's obvious. And it's it's just I just find it just so obvious and apparent that it like I can't understand why anyone would trust them. And I just found that the most bizarre thing that anyone would trust them and not just all right, two more heads for the mounted gates of the capital. Like, I'm sorry, I just found it. Now, when it comes to trusting Pycelle, weirdly, I actually get that. If only because Pycelle seems, at first glance, harmless, or just a bumbling old man, but in reality, he's far darker than that. So that Ned's trust of Pycelle, to an extent, I kind of can see it. But on the other hand, when it comes to Baelish, I just find it, I don't get it.
It's weird.
And
A
in that
part of
regard,
a part of me wonders if Eddard ever really trusted Baelish, or if it was more so because of his lack
Ned,
of movement that he chose, he was forced to rely on Baelish. Because what I mean by that is, and maybe it was a show only scene, but I feel like it was in the books as well. Eddard straight up tells you, like, oh no, that I think that blows a hole in my thing, because he says like I was wrong to mistrust you, Peter Baelish, and he corrects him, going like, nah, not trusting me was the smartest thing you done.
yeah, yeah.
So now that makes me wonder:
And
did he, despite that, still trust Baelish, or is it again just like a situation where because he's not much of a schemer himself, he's forced on to rely on Baelish to be the scheming end, like hire the Gold Cloaks?
yeah. On the other hand, he should have probably paid them better.
I think what led to this whole situation is Eddard just kind of didn't try to think of other options other people would take. I think he looked at it to like I think for example like when he gave the offer to Peter Baelish, it was a slam deal to him because like yeah, if he does this, it's going to end really well for him. Not thinking that oh, if he switches, it still is going to end pretty well for him, possibly. So it's like
Yeah,
that. I think that was his weakness. I think he was offering a really good deal, not even thinking about others offering him a better or similar deal.
exactly.
And to be
And
fair, he varies in regards to Eddard was trustworthy, if I remember correctly. I don't think however you pronounce it, did any particular actions that screwed Eddard over. I think he was in many ways an ally.
yeah, Varys, well, Varys would have eventually screwed him over because the whole Blackfire thing.
Yeah, Fagon.
But, or Aegon, yeah. On the other hand, I find the now I think that with Eddard with Varys, I think that in that regard, yeah, it's funny how Varys just basically does nothing throughout the whole thing. He's just like, I ain't doing nothing. I'm just gonna let stuff happen, which is kind of funny in a way because that just like he's just watching it burn in a way that like King's Landing burn in a way,
Well, yeah,
proverbially speaking.
which for book varies makes perfect sense. Show varies less so.
Yeah, and the only thing I found funny was that the whole speech he gives to Eddard when he's imprisoned is, like, oh well, the king I have in mind is like this, and like, like he's so dreamy and he's lived amongst the peasants, he's like them. Now, this might sound weird, but I kind of hope that Fagon would end up insane. You know why? So that like he could just be the worst targ ever, and just out of hand order the death of Varys, who goes, wait, I did all this to set up for just more of the same. Whoops! What the heck?
Nah,
Where
nah,
he's
nah, nah,
hoisted
nah,
on his
nah,
own.
nah, nah, nah. That sounds like some Ryan Johnson writing right there. Get that shit out.
Oh come on! It'd be funny.
Mr. Subverting Expectations. Fuck off.
Well, that's what Martin does.
No, this is it's a completely different topic, but I'll stuff it in here. No, Martin does not subvert expectations. He just doesn't do like what is normally done. And here's the thing. Subverting expectation is like setting something up to happen only for that to like crash and burn. People like to point to the Red Wedding, Eddard's execution as, that's subverting expectations. No, it's not. Because it's reasonable for someone to read the book with no idea of what's to happen and come to the conclusion that this shit's going to end badly. There's all the hints, there's all the clues, there's all the setup for failure. But because we're used to the hero always winning, that's what surprises us. He's not subverting our expectations. We're just sheep.
I'm not sure I agree with the whole sheep thing, but that said, the Red Wedding was fairly predictable, and so was Ned's death. Now, I do think that there's an element to Martin that does favor that kind of approach to storytelling. On the other hand, I think that it would have been interesting with Vagon, and I don't think that'd be subverting expectation. I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking that would be something that would fit because Varys doesn't know Vagon. He's built him up in his head as an impossible prince, and I kind of thought that it's similar to how Sansa built up Joffrey, and that it would probably end badly.
I don't want another Joffrey. I don't want this Aegon to be a psychopathic cunt like the Aegon in House of the Dragon. Get me one decent Aegon in a show, please. Just one.
Well, there's Aegon the Third. I like Aegon the Third.
That's Egg, right? From Dunk and Egg?
No, that's the depressed one.
God, why? So many Aegons. Why? I understand why George R. R. Martin decided to do that, but it's still annoying.
Yeah,
you're right.
I guess.
So yeah, you're right. Aegon the Third was after Aegon the Second. Okay, yeah.
But anyways, as to Nettie, it is pretty interesting seeing a nobleman just totally suck that badly at politics. And he's essentially obviously based off of Lord Hastings from the War of the Roses, who was just a total disaster in politics in some ways, and didn't see Richard III's betrayals coming when he should have.
Well, to be fair, didn't Hastings like kind of succeed at the beginning?
Hastings was at the beginning, and he was the most honorable man in England at the time, and he was very well respected and beloved. It's just the Woodvilles hated him, and the Woodvilles were greedy jerks And Hastings wanted to counterbalance their influence at court and thought that they had too much influence over Edward the Fifth. And the trouble is, he was right on every account. The problem is, he felt that Richard of York was his only option, and that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And you know what? I was besties with his brother, so surely that'll make me and him besties. But Richard III didn't believe in allies, only in victims that he could devour like a giant spider might. And he squeezed Hastings of all his usefulness, then disposed of him when he was no longer useful. So yeah, I guess you could say it's a bit similar to the Baelish and Stark relationship.
Hmm. Now,
So in
I do.
that regard,
I have to say though, when I think more about it, I don't think it should be that surprising that Eddard's wasn't that good with politics in the South for two main reasons. For starters,
he wasn't raised.
because
He
like
didn't. He wasn't raised.
I'm sorry.
He wasn't raised in the South. He's not familiar with it.
Oh no, it like that's part of it, but I think it's also along the lines of when you're top dog. Like if you're like, it's not surprising. Like if you're king and you just get the kingship handed to you, you. I mean, you're not savvy with politics. There are a lot of kings who aren't savvy with politics because they were just given it because the real guy who was savvy with politics got them the crown to begin with a generation or so ago or whatever. I think it's a similar case to Eddard. He inherited the title of Lord Paramount, and he had no ambition to like scheme to get the crown himself or anything. So I mean, he was just fine there. And the culture of the North is just completely different from that of the South. So it doesn't surprise me at
Yeah,
all that he struggled so much with the politics of the South, especially the big one of the King and the Iron Throne. It's just a completely different beast.
yeah, yeah. And he's. This might sound weird, but I don't think he's ever had to struggle to assert his dominance, even in the North. And that probably just adds to it because he's always been, as you said, top dog, and at least in the North.
It also
And he's
it
always been the number two.
yeah, it also helps that the North like is very honorable
They're
compared.
practically a they're practically a separate kingdom
I mean, aren't
from the rest.
it's almost like this place is called the Seven Kingdoms.
Well, what I mean is they're almost separate from the rest of Westeros.
I mean,
They
they're
have more in common with
they are the
with
only
those.
kingdom that is the first men.
Yeah. Well, all I was going to say was they have more in common with the Wildlings to an extent than they do the other people of the South.
And they hate those sons of bitches.
Yeah. Well, I guess they do have some things in common with the River Lords, but outside that, they don't really have anything in common with anyone else.
Mhm. Now,
Um,
with
and
that, I actually have a little bit of a question for you. What would you say is your
uh
favorite scene or moment for Eddard?
oh.
Here, I'll give you a little bit of time by offering up mine. I think my favorite moment was Eddard in the dungeon with Varys, kind of having their little back and forth. And even in this like dark space where he's lost, he's just like, nah, I got my pride, I got my honor. You can't. So like, I'm not gonna like say some
what,
crazy bullshit in order to save my own skin. I'm ready to die.
what I
And you think it's going to
what I find
end
interesting.
like that, but then Varys just says, "What about your daughters?" And that just
But
changes
what's
everything.
Yes, but what I was going to say, what that scene also does, what Ned succeeds in doing is showing Varys for the hypocrite he is. Varys could easily slip them out through those tunnels, and Eddard points that out. Like, you could slip us out. Why don't you? Oh, well, I'm trying to serve a better king. That's just an excuse. Varys does not have the moral fiber in him to actually do the right thing.
No, 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 no,
And
no, no, no. Like, I love that scene. I love my Eddard, but I'm gonna defend Varys here a bit. So, let's say Varys does sneak Eddard out. What happens?
while the palace goes under lockdown,
And
as does the
Eddard,
capital.
assuming Eddard makes it back to the north, war breaks out, very
He's
similar to what happens, and we likely still get War of the Five Kings, correct?
Yep.
Varys was hoping
Though,
that by Eddard staying in prison and with using his daughters as kind of hostage, he would admit his quote unquote wrongs, head to the wall, and talk to Robb into laying down his arms, thus avoiding the war in general.
although I would argue there's no way Rob would lay down his arms.
I think if Eddard was spared and he went to the wall and he just like talked to Robb and be like, nah, 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 don't do it, he would have.
I don't. I don't think he would have.
I think he would have, because it's one thing for your father to die, it's another thing to him be banished to an area you can visit him anytime you want.
I just think that Rob's sense of moral outrage and the Starks' loyalty to Stannis and to the Baratheons might win out to an extent, and or at least to a limited extent. And I just think I don't know. It's weird because I also think that Brendan Blackfish also had a bit of influence over Rob, and I don't think Brendan would. I just see it as the Rubicon was already crossed, I guess,
You know,
and
you actually do have a strong point there, because even if Eddard did leave, like let's give it the benefit of the doubt that he does talk Robb into, like, calming down a bit, and the Riverlands calming down a bit. Stannis and Renly kind of throw a wrench into that, because neither of them are going to be standing down. And then you got, it's going to be
yeah.
War of the Four Kings instead of the Five Kings, pretty much. And then it's kind of curious on what the Riverlands or the North would do in this case.
And that's where I think Rob would obviously want in on the war, and since he's now in command. Now, on the other hand, this might sound weird, but would Eddard actually head for the wall?
Uh, I think he would, just because, as bad of the situation as it is, he still gave his word.
Yes,
And
but his first word was to Robert, and to and his word, like I just mean, his first oath was to Robert, and all those that are opposing him are oath breakers by their very nature and men of low character to his mind. So would an oath actually matter to them?
I think what would likely
Not,
happen
not
is
that
Eddard.
there's Robert's legacy.
I think
There's Robert's legacy
for the
that
sake
he's
of
going to
his,
cling to.
we keep starting and stopping at the same time. I think for the sake of his daughters, this is one of the, like, that's the thing. As honorable as Eddard is, family is still the most important thing to him. That's why he did the dishonorable act of lying about John's parentage to everyone. There are
Fair
things
enough.
that even
Although
Eddard will swallow his honor for.
very true. All I mean is if he has his daughters in the north and his oath to Robert contradicts the oath to the Lannisters, which oath will win out?
I think the oath to the Lannisters, like I don't know, Eddard just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who backstabs and whatnot. I think when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it, and if there is a conflict, he's going to do the one that, like, keeps his family the safest.
But let's be honest, would the Lannisters, like to Eddard's mind, would the Lannisters eat? Would they be willing to let his family be safe and left alone?
I mean, so that's another thing. Let's say, because it's crazy, but the
There's
Lannisters
silent
may not even
Lannisters.
the Lannisters may not even release Sansa and Arya. They might still hold on to them,
Exactly.
and if that's the case,
Now,
then there's
in
no way in hell Eddard's going to break the promise.
exactly. Now, my point is just now if all three got out, there's no way he's gonna come in with the kind of uh, fury that Robert might. But if his daughters are still held, there's no way he's gonna wage a war because he's got his daughters to think of. And that's where I'm just saying that the situation is very, very peculiar, and I think that I just mean it depends on the Lannisters. Now, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but what really happens is he ends up lying and claiming he wanted the throne and getting his head chopped off by ice. Mm-hmm. With that being a point when, well, there was really no coming back. Now, on the other hand, the minute Eddard uttered those words, on the one hand, I think he would have wanted to at some point abjure himself of them and say, I had to lie under testimony because it was under duress, which this is a fact. And the trouble is that the Lannisters do have a reputation for being the most dishonorable louts in the entirety of the Seven Kingdoms. And that's the reality. So everybody would know they are the sort to do that. On the other hand, the whole plan, all the plans Tywin, Cersei, and everybody else cooked up or hoped to cook up are all thrown out the window because Joffrey just can't keep from wanting blood. Mm-hmm. And that's where Eddard, when it comes to Jon's heritage, that's where I'm just going to touch on that. I think real quick that the boring thing is if Jon is Lyanna and Rhaegar's son, which it looks like it is in the books. I only say it looks like it because Martin has yet to get to that point in the books.
We'll find out in a decade or so.
Yeah, or two. But on the other hand, with the show, like I just find that the whole idea is boring to an extent. It's so predictable. But on the other hand, when it comes to now, I'm weird because I think that the idea of Jon being Lyanna's son, I don't think Robert would have actually hurt Jon. But on the other hand, the trouble is, I think Robert would have hurt Jon in a different way than what people imagine. I think he would have wanted to claim Jon in a way and at least foster him and raise him, and would have probably wanted to kind of cling to him.
I completely disagree. Like, I hesitate to say that Robert would kill Jon. I think it's a possibility, but I don't think that's the certain one. There's no way in Seven Hells that Rob's going to adopt Jon and decide to raise him.
Well, I think he would have wanted to foster him.
The offspring,
or at least have some sort of...
The offspring of the man he hated more than anyone else because he believed that he'd raped Lyanna. And now you have what he would likely still consider the rape of Lyanna, of what came of that. It would just be a reminder of that.
On the other hand, Robert Baratheon is a man who deeply loved Lyanna, and this is also half Lyanna. So I'm just saying that there's a shade of the character there that I don't think...
Robert's more wrathful than loving. Anger for him is more powerful than love.
But on the other hand, his rage was inspired by his love for Lyanna and even Ned at various points. So, like, he went to war for Lyanna. He went to, like, how far is he willing to go for Ned? Like, that's my point. So I'm going to strongly disagree. I think that even if he wouldn't want to claim Jon, I don't think he'd hurt him. But the thing is, if he wanted to claim him and foster him, that would lead to Jon's death no matter what.
I mean, I still don't see it because this is the guy who, like, even though they weren't his kids, he thought they were, didn't really put in any ounce of taking care of his own.
Yeah, but you got to bear in mind, the trouble is Robert never felt a connection to those kids.
And so he's going to feel a connection with half of the girl he loved and half of the guy he hated.
To an extent, Robert's a man of contradictions.
At best, it's a flip of the coin, but no, I cannot see that at all.
Well, it's just I tend to think that with Robert, wrath and love come like are interlinked in a way, and they're inextricably bound together. Now, even if let's say he didn't claim John, I think the problem is you'd have had him just like he wouldn't keep it a secret, and that's a problem as well.
Oh yeah, not
On the
just
other
that.
hand,
Everyone would be telling him to kill John because John is a bastard of the prince who was supposed to be
exactly.
the heir to the throne. So yeah, that's another layer and why I don't think Robert would ever adopt or I think he's far more
I didn't
likely to
say it,
kill John.
but on the other hand, fostering would also be politically savvy in that you have him as a hostage.
No, because then if especially like that's the thing, hostage or not, like you got to kill him because otherwise when you die then maybe someone else decides to put him on the throne.
Well, that's where you do the Edward the Fourth thing and you starve him to death eventually, like or throw him out on the streets after he has no wealth. I'm joking about the Tudor, not the Tudor, but the War of the Roses, with how many noble kids were just their fortunes seized from them and they were just chucked out on the streets. Um, but in all seriousness, don't think Eddard, I don't think Robert would have in the end fostered him to an extent. I think he might have wanted to, but I think Ed would have won out.
I
I
mean,
just don't see Robert and John
because there's just
because
way too much. Like it's not. There's a lot of emotional complications and political complications, and nah, I don't think so. But we could
I
probably go
think
into that more in Robert's video.
John would have been sent to the wall, or no matter what, to an extent.
Maybe I'll give you the wall. I might give you the wall.
And I just don't see Robert hating John.
Speaking of
And
that, though,
I also see it as,
did you?
but with Ned, I think Ned was actually a terrible father figure to John. And
Excuse you, motherfucker.
because look at how he tolerated how Catelyn treated John, and he did not kind of let her in on things. So in that regard, he kind of planted the seeds for this conflict between the two and said, "Yeah." And they were basically made to squabble over what was literally nothing
Well, yeah,
to an extent.
because there's a real
And
possibility, I'd say, especially with the book Catelyn, that if Eddard told Cat, she would have been against this. Especially early on in their marriage where they barely know each other. Hey, I know I just got back from war. We've technically been married for like 2 years, but you've only seen me for 2 days. You see this baby? It's the offspring of the previous prince that Robert killed. So we're gonna keep it safe, all right?
well, I think that he should have waited a while and then told her.
Nah, nah, I don't know. There's just an aspect about Catelyn in the books. I don't think she's as terrible as a lot of people make her out to be, but I don't know. I think she would look at that as risking not only her life, his life, but also their children's lives, and she would not be a fan of that.
Fair enough. She's not very bright. Um,
Well, that has nothing to do with it. That's perfectly reasonable to think, oh shit, you're risking
no,
everything
no,
for this.
yeah, I know. I just mean that on the other hand, there's also some of her decisions later, which I'm thinking, how would she screw it up to an extent? And I guess I just view it as, on the other hand,
And the benefits are not there. Like, yeah, Catelyn and John didn't get along. Boo hoo.
but I just mean there was no attempt to shield John or to it's almost without this might sound weird, but I almost got a sense that there was very little warmth. And I just found that Eddard just utterly failed John. And
Eddard's the reason he's
on the other
alive.
hand, yes, but what I meant was as a father figure.
Nah. Like, are there things that he could have done differently that may have been better? Yeah, of course. Everything can
Yeah.
probably be done better. but
But he could have been worse.
I think he did the best, and especially with like not taking the chances that he needed to. And call me crazy, but as mean as Catelyn was, it wasn't that bad. Like the worst it got
Yeah.
when she was grieving over her son who's in a coma, looking to
Now,
John and saying
yeah.
it should have been you. Like, okay, that was pretty bad, but she was in a very messed up situation.
No, I'll actually grant you that. It could have been worse. It could have been Tywin.
So yeah,
I'm just saying
I didn't
with the
expect
way
you.
Tywin treats Tyrion.
I mean, I know, I understand that, but I didn't expect to be fighting you so much on so many points today.
But on the other hand, like I just think Ned, I don't look at him as a idealistic character. Like I just view him as a very complicated, flawed individual,
Oh,
and
oh yeah,
I think he's one of the most interesting.
and it's not just that, but the parts that we idolize about him is what makes him a flawed character. It's his dedication to his honor that makes him a flawed character.
To an extent. Um, that said, I also find it funny how little he knows about Stannis Baratheon and how he defends Stannis's claim. Like when Joffrey's obviously proven not to be Bobby B's son. Uh, that, yeah, I think that the thing is Ned. Ned is someone who's trying to find sanity in an insane world in a way, and I think that's a very interesting attribute to his character and a very realistic one. And while I have my criticisms about him and John, I do think, on the other hand, he didn't do as badly as others. But I just think maybe he should have fostered John.
Maybe foster him to Howland Reed or something. He could grow up on frogs like you.
But no, I was actually thinking the Umbers or something.
Nah, they'd break poor pretty boy John in
half. Fair enough. Or the Foresters or something. I don't know. Like, most definitely not the Bolton.
Foresters would be interesting, especially since we have the Telltale Foresters. But anywho, by any chance, have you been able to conjure up your favorite Eddard Stark moment?
I've been trying to put this off. Okay, there's quite a few. I think it's the Bessie scene.
The Bessie? Oh, okay. You mean like after that? Okay.
Yeah, with that whole interaction between.
So hold on.
Robert.
Do you like this scene because of Robert? Is it like 90% Robert, 10% Eddard because he's there?
I have to admit, I actually like that we get to see Eddard laugh.
But we also got the amazing line, "Thank the gods for Bessie and her tits."
There is that, but what I like is that I find it, well, that's one of the two scenes that are probably my favorites now that I think about it. It's that, yeah, there's an element of Robert there, but we get to see that the only one who can pull Eddard a little out of his shell is Bobby B. So that you see why, like, and how the relationship used to work, with Eddard having never been a guy who laughs a lot, but Robert manages to get a laugh out of him.
I mean, to be fair,
so you see why they're back.
It's because Robert's just fucking hilarious. Every guy in the North, like except for like Great John's probably the only funny guy up in the North. They all don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, the other favorite scene I have is when Eddard's pretty much telling Robert, "Then you're no better than the Mad King," and where they have that big blowout.
Ooh, yeah, that was good.
But I really like that scene. I just like seeing the two rage at each other. It's fascinating, and I find it funny how these are two pretty smart guys, but they end up they get so enraged and blinded by anger that it becomes a more emotional squabble than it does like an intellectual one or even physical. It just becomes an emotional thing where they're hurling everything they can at each other. And I think had Ned actually left there, I don't think Robert really would have chased after him with all his wrath as he said he would. But if anything, Robert would have backed down and come running back to Nettie's love. But
I could
on the other hand,
totally I could totally picture like Robert suiting up, grabbing his hammer, getting ready, and then like halfway be like, "Nah, I can't do it."
yeah, I could actually see that. I could actually see that in where he's like he sees Ned and he's like, immediately he runs to him to embrace him and he's like, "Sorry for the fight,
Like
but can't we talk about this?"
you know he was getting ready. He was getting ready to kill Eddard, like he was getting in his armor and whatnot. But then they came and told him that Eddard just got attacked by Jamie. He's like, "My boy."
Yeah, yeah. My baby. Like in some, I saw that in a spoof comic of where Superman tossed Batman's kid in the air and Batman goes, "My baby." I can totally see Robert doing that. But yeah, I like the fight scene and the laughter scene. Like I just find these two different scenes really interesting in how you see how they are friends. But yeah, like I said, now on the other hand, I'm weird when it comes to John. Real quick, once again, I really hope that it is that John is in the books Ned's bastard because that would make it. Now in the books we get to see more of the bond between Ned and John. So when I said that there is Ned, I don't fully get the relationship. It was mostly in the show. In the book, I kind of see it a little more, I guess. But I think it'd be really funny if he was John's dad. I just think it'd be fun.
I'm actually in somewhat of
But
agreement with you because the long lost royalty trope. You know, it's not the most original.
I'm a little tired of
Not to say that it can't be done well, but like yeah, like even in Lord of the Rings, Aragorn being the long lost king of Gondor, just not feeling it, bro. Not feeling it.
I love it. No, I feel it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is King LSR. I love it.
But I think
But
an evil part of me would just find it hilarious to look at everyone, including myself, partly for like just putting so much weight on R plus L equals J and how true it is, only for no. And I really did just have sex with Bessie.
yeah, yeah, or like with some fishmonger's daughter
Or actually
or
Ashara
something.
Dane. I think that's the second most prolific. If it's not R plus L equals J, then it's Eddard Stark and Ashara Dane that gave birth to John.
I I really hope it's a fisherman's daughter or something. Like I just thought that'd be funnier. Like you know what I mean? He had a shot with Ashara, but he went for some rando girl that he just ran into that fished him out of the sea. Like I just thought that would be the funniest thing.
Now it could turn into a whole like
Um,
How I Met Your Mother show where Eddard just like keeps trying to tell like, okay, it started after I went and I saw your aunt dying. And he's like, oh, my aunt was my mother. No, what the fuck are you talking about? And then I went to Ashara Dane, and oh, so that's my mom. No, shut the fuck up. And then she turned me down, and then there was this fishing wife.
it's like she can't be my mom. Oh yeah, she is.
And you're like, no, you're
Or in her
right.
tits.
No, you're right. She wasn't. It was the daughter.
Yeah, or whatever. Like you know the fisherman's wife or whatever. That like I just thought that peasant woman being John's mom would be just the most funny and interesting thing. But I know I'm weird.
No,
Um,
no, I think that's
and I
reasonable, especially in a series that quote unquote subverts expectations. It's, kind of fun to like expect the worst or like the least impressive outcome.
yeah,
Now,
but
with that,
I,
we just
now
crossed over an
I
hour. Is there anything else that you particularly want to go over?
I was going to defend the trope of the long lost royalty. While I do think it's been overused over the years, I have seen it done well. So you know, uh, I just don't think the show handled it very well.
I'll push
So
a bit against that just because there's like hints at it. Like really, really clever hints
there,
that makes it
there are.
like the fact that the audience
So I
has
thought
been able to solve it. I think makes it a bit better than most, where it's like just a big reveal. Like, yeah, you were a long like Spaceballs. Like, hey, it turns out I'm a prince.
Yeah,
So
like,
I do think the trope. I
well,
think the
I was
trope in this is handled well. It's just it's been done.
well, even the way, well, I found it way too obvious. But I was going to say, Memory Sorrow and Thorn, for example, hints and hints, but does it far more subtle, for example, than um, Game of Thrones did. So, like, I'm just using another fantasy example. That said, um, I do think that of all the Game of Thrones characters, while I do like Ned to an extent, Bobby B is way more interesting
Oh yeah. Well,
and way
luckily,
funnier.
oh yeah. I mean, he's just so much more entertaining. He's got that. I mean, there's a reason why all the lords who surrendered to him were fighting for him the next day. He's just one of the most charismatic guys ever. Period.
Yeah, yeah. Eddard was very clearly supposed to be a number two guy.
But with that, I think we've gone over pretty much everything that needs to. We couldn't. It wasn't very much a huge back and forth in regards to show versus book, just because of the similarities. May,
Okay, which do you prefer?
okay, I was actually about to say, I think just because of the visuals and Sean B, I gotta go with show, just because I'm a much more visual
So,
guy, and so it's an unfair comparison
Sean
because
Bean,
they're so similar.
Sean Bean, Sean Bean, Sean Bean for the
Mm-hmm.
win.
Oh yeah, I mean he did an amazing job. All I wish is he dyed his hair, then he would have been perfect.
And he did it all for Yorkshire. Just kidding. Sorry, it's just that trail, that commercial. I can't get it out of my head since I saw it. Do
No,
it for Yorkshire.
don't worry about that. But hey, I want to say thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk about these characters with you. And hey, for everyone still listening, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel because we have plenty of other Game of Thrones character conversations that we'll be delving into.
And don't forget to go to Jasper's channel and like and subscribe over there, as we're going to be talking about pretty much my favorite character, Bobby B.
And with that squared away, I
So,
hope you all have a wonderful day and be safe.
and do it for Yorkshire.